Number 1. Dating. This is a really messed up story that has taken me a very long time to share with anyone. But as long as you keep it anonymous, I have no problem telling you about it. It wasn't so long ago, so we all had smartphones pretty much like we do now. It's sort of important to know that. Over the summer one year, I went to stay with my aunt and her kids. They lived in the suburbs of Chicago. I grew up in the country out in West Virginia, so it was pretty cool. I was going to get a job over the summer, so I would have a lot of money to do all the things I wanted to do during my senior year at high school. I got a job at Six Flags, and boy did they make you work back in the day. I was put on games in the busiest games section of the park. I would often spend 12 hours working there, and it was really exhausting. A week into my time there, I had a guy come up to me several times. It was the ring toss game, which was the one that seemed to get the least wins, but he kept coming back over and over again. I was under the presumption that he was interested in me. As the night took over the park, it was quite a sight that I would never have seen in West Virginia. The lights were bright, the games were loud, but eventually people began to leave the park, and the commotion slowed down. When we were about a half hour from closing, there were less people in the games section, as it was in the back of the park. But that guy walked up and finally introduced himself. His name was Paul, and we talked for a bit. He asked me what school I went to, and I let him know I was from out of town. He wondered if we could get together after work got off. My aunt was not very strict about being home, so I did. Paul was pretty neat. He was very confident. He had a really nice car. He tended to talk a lot, too. For a few weeks, we went out nearly every night that I was working, and spent a few days together when I had them off. He was a lot of fun. After those weeks, though, something weird happened. He had a season's pass to the park, and normally would be there all the time. However, he didn't show up one day. I didn't call him or anything. I didn't want to be needy. But after a day turned into a week, and then a week and a half, things started worrying me. I mean, mostly I just told myself that he got bored and wanted to dump me without telling me to my face. Whenever I tried to call him on his phone, it would always go right to voicemail. And then, after about a week and a half, I saw him hanging out in the park again. Only this time, there was something different about him. He didn't seem as confident as he had before. He actually seemed a bit nervous. I assumed he realized he had made a mistake ignoring me and was trying to make up for it. I wasn't really angry at him, so after a while, I waved him over, and he came over and we talked. I let him know I wasn't upset, and he wondered if I would want to go out with him again. I agreed, and told him that I could go after I get off work. He asked when that would be, and I thought that was weird. I told him it was the time I always get off work. I told him to just meet me back here, when the park was going to close. Anyway, when I got off work, we walked to his car. It was a nice car, but it was not the same one. I asked him what happened to it, and he told me he had gotten into a wreck, which was the major reason we hadn't been talking. That right there, although making me concerned about him, also explained why he had been acting so weird. After spending some time together just cruising, Paul pulled off into a gas station to get some gas. It was prepay, and they didn't have a card reader, so I went in to pay and get us some drinks. While Paul was gone, I heard a ringtone. I looked and noticed that he had left his smartphone in the seat of his car, but that wasn't what scared me. The caller ID on the phone listed the call as coming from Paul. Quickly grabbing my own phone, I noticed that the number on the ID was the number Paul had given me. I really didn't know what to do at first, but at the last moment I grabbed the phone and connected the call. I did not speak though, but the person on the other end sounded exactly like Paul, and he asked, "Pete, where the hell are you? I've been trying to get in touch with you all day." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. I just quickly hung the phone up. A thought occurred to me, and I picked up my phone and looked his name up on Facebook. I hadn't done this before simply because I don't like Facebook, and people's need to tell me their favorite show will come on in about 10 minutes is all I ever see on Facebook. Sure enough, I found Paul's profile, and his profile picture was of him, and the guy I could only assume was his identical twin brother, Pete, the person I had been spending my evening with. Now, it might be difficult for you to understand why this freaked me out, but trust me, it did. Not only had I spent the evening with someone who was pretending to be his twin brother, but Paul's comment on the phone made me believe that Paul didn't even know his twin brother was doing this. When Pete came back, I was pretty nervous. I had no idea that if he was dishonest enough to do what he was doing, who knows what else he'd be capable of doing. I was able to convince Pete that I was not feeling well, and asked if he could take me home. I told him the following day was my day off, and we could do something then. He asked me when, and I told him I'd give him a call when I knew for sure. I could tell he was very disappointed with that answer. He knew that I would be talking to his brother, and must have been trying to decide what to do next. He offered to just call me tomorrow, and I decided to let him think that would happen. He finally took me home. I called Paul and got his voicemail. I told him about what happened, that I would really appreciate neither brother bugging me at work ever again. I never heard or saw them ever again. Number 2. I'm not sure how scary this is to anyone else, but this is easily one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. When I was 16, I moved halfway across the country to a bigger city. It was so much larger than my previous town, and also much friendlier. Right away, I got back into my habit of taking long walks that I had started at my previous house. That way I could get exercise, listen to music, and even explore the new neighborhood. Unfortunately, as someone who was pretty busy, the only time I could take walks was after dinner. Honestly, as a female, it was slightly intimidating to be in unfamiliar places by myself, especially when I didn't know anyone who I could get help from. We had a dog I could have brought, but she was old and tended to pass out when she walked too long, so I didn't want to risk it. However, I soon grew accustomed to it, just being me, even later at night. One day, I walked nearly all the way to my siblings' elementary school, which was 2 miles away, and that's when I walked past a certain house. Standing in the driveway was a man. He was smoking and leaning against the wall of the house, staring out at the side of the road that the house faced. As I walked by, the guy then put out a cigarette, crushing it on the ground, and turned to face me. "Hello," he called out in a thick accent. I said hello back. His neighbors did try to talk to me sometimes, so it wasn't weird, though usually the headphones implied that I didn't want to be bothered. He wasn't ready to give up, though. "What is your name?" he asked. I told him a nickname that I rarely use. "That is beautiful," he professed. "I'd like to be your friend." I just smiled and nodded, trying not to be rude since English clearly wasn't his first language, though I had no intention of being friends with a man I'd never met before. I also stand out quite a bit, since I dress in an elegant goth style, with long skirts and lace, which tends to attract a lot of attention. So, it wasn't too odd that he had noticed me. But all that changed in the next second, when he instructed, "Give me your phone number." I froze, definitely not wanting to give him my phone number. "I don't know my number." He didn't believe me at first, but he finally accepted it, annoyed. "Oh, then I'll give you my number," he decided. I have to get home soon," I lied again. "It's almost 9 o'clock, and I have to be home by then. Sorry, maybe later." He was pretty mad, but I walked away, not even daring to look him in the eye. Now, if it had ended there, it wouldn't be scary, just odd. However, that wasn't my last encounter with him. A few months after that, I went on another walk towards the elementary school. I had been on that route several more times before, and I hadn't even seen the guy, so I assumed it was safe. And this time, it wasn't summer. It was October, and almost 9 o'clock happened when it was a lot darker. So when it happened the first time, it was still light, but now it was nearly pitch black. I had misjudged how quickly the walk would go, and now I was stuck in the dark. So when I passed the house again on the way back to my house, the man was standing there, once again, smoking. just like before. He put out the cigarette. I tried not to look. He then called out the name I'd given him, which scared me, but I just kept walking. Maybe my courage was enough to talk to him in the evening, but not in the dark. He called it out again, then added, "Come here." By this point I had crossed the side street that his house faced, and I thought I was kind of safe. At least he wouldn't leave the yard, right? When he was quiet for a while, and I had made a little distance, I turned to see what he was doing. And to my horror, he was getting in his car. His headlights came on, and his car went into reverse, backing up at a speed I hadn't expected. Now, the sidewalk I was on had a fence on one side, and the other had the open road. The other side of the road had a baseball field, so there was nowhere to hide. And then I ran. The first place I could find was some bushes outside someone else's house, about 30 feet from the man's house. I ducked behind them and stayed there as the car finally whirled past my hiding place. I stayed there for about 10 minutes, desperately making sure the car didn't come back. I had no idea of his intentions. They likely weren't good. Well, by this time, it was past 9, and I had to get home. I crept out of the bushes and walked back down the street. Now, I knew, as well as you've probably realized, that if the car went that way, it had to come back at some point. So until I got to a roundabout that separated into 4 roads, I scanned the face of every driver that came by, attempting to stay in the shadows. I got home safe, only a little past 9, and I didn't tell my parents what had happened. A couple years or so later, I decided to walk to a grocery store, even though the only way to get there was to walk past his house. I was a little scared, but I figured it had been a while, so it wouldn't be a huge deal, and I'd just avoid that side of the road. Well, when I walked past his house, the garage door was open, but it was fine. I didn't see anyone. That is, until I saw something small moving around towards the ceiling of the garage. At first I thought it was a kite or something, but no, it was a hand, sticking out of the door and waving to me, with the person's body nowhere in sight. I kept walking, and eventually I turned around to check. Yep, there was the rest of the person, standing on the edge of the curb and waving to me with his whole arm. I shuddered and kept walking, repeatedly checking to make sure he wasn't following me. He wasn't following me this time, but I kept my phone open in case I needed to call 911 or my family. I still live in that house, but I refuse to walk past there anymore. It's just not worth the risk. Number 3. Andrea. My fiancé Hunter once shared this chilling memory with me, and to this day it serves to remind me that people shouldn't judge others based on their appearance. Here is his story, which happened to him when he was 15. Throughout my life, I spent many days and nights in the hospital, most of them while curled up in a chair next to my dad during his multiple extended stays. His latest visit was the worst one of the lot, and it was caused by him knocking his head against the bathroom sink and going into a series of seizures. The day the accident happened, I was walking my dog Ozzy, and he started tugging frantically against the leash in a way I had never seen. As an empath and spiritual person, I believe the animals can sense things that humans aren't perceptive to, so I let him lead me back towards the house without argument. The house was overly quiet, and when I called to my dad, the sounds seemed to echo eerily. As I made my way down the hall near my dad's room, a massive amount of pain-filled energy enveloped me, and it was emanating from the bathroom. In the tiny room was a horrific sight. My father lay on the bathroom floor. His eyes rolled back in his skull, and his skin an unnatural shade of blue. He was laying in his own blood, and at the sight my medical training immediately kicked in. After checking his pulse and rolling him onto his side, like I had been taught by his doctors, I supported his head with towels, and I used a compression technique on the gash of his skull. I called 911. During the ambulance ride, he went into an additional 13 seizures, and it took the doctors putting him into a medically induced coma for them to stop. A few nights after the accident, I was sleeping next to his bed in the ICU when I woke up from a cold breeze. I looked over to my dad, who was sitting upright in his bed with his eyes rolled back. He was attached to tubes and IVs, and I could tell that he still hadn't woken from the coma. Without even taking a breath, he whispered to me in a cold, hard voice, "I don't want you seeing me like this." His back slumped into the pillows, and I sat there in shock. At this point I was already on edge. How had he been able to speak? I needed to clear my mind and maybe talk to his neurologist if I could find him there that late. So I went for a walk around the dimly lit hospital. Every shadow seemed to turn towards me in the nearest silent building. There were no doctors running around tonight, and there seemed to be a lack of other staff. Due to the immense size of the hospital, I ended up getting lost down a long hallway, so I decided to try heading back the way I came. When I was about halfway down one of the many corridors, I saw a lady in a hospital gown. Something was very odd about her, though, and she appeared almost transparent. At first, I thought it was due to my lack of sleep, but upon reaching her, she disappeared. There were no rooms or other hallways nearby that she could have gone down. I shook it off as an exhaustion-induced illusion, and I kept making my way back to my dad's room. About 5 minutes later, I saw the same woman down another hallway, so I decided that she must be real, and I started to follow her to make sure she was okay. She looked even more pale this time, and I was worried that she might be in need of immediate medical attention. 3 more hallways passed by, and then I saw her walk into a room in a part of the hospital I had never been in before. I opened the door slowly, and the figure was standing in the middle of the room with her back to me. As she turned to face me, I almost screamed. Where she should have had eyes, there were just voided holes, and not even pieces of her eyes remained. Her mouth was sewn shut, and her expression was inhumanly blank. I ran from the room in terror, not stopping my frantic dash until I recognized where I was. I had finally found my dad's room, and I had never felt more relieved. After the encounter, I headed back to my chair to try and get some sleep. I kept telling myself that the whole thing was due to the extreme stress I had been under, coupled with the lack of sleep for the last few days. I finally managed to drift off, only to wake from night terrors a few hours later. I got up to use the bathroom and take a shower, and when I went to brush my teeth, there were 5 words written in the steam that had coated the mirror. "Why did you leave me?" As I turned around, I saw a piece of white hospital gown to the side of me, just slightly out of my vision, and I thought for a moment my dad had gotten out of bed. I excitedly went to hug him when I realized that it was that same terrifying spirit. She stood over my dad, with as much of a smile as she could muster through stitched lips, and she touched his forehead as she whispered something to him. I was so scared that I blacked out, and I woke up back in my usual chair. I couldn't feel any bad energy, and my dad's complexion actually looked a little bit less pale than it had been. 2 days later, my dad came out of the coma. At first, he didn't understand where he was, who he was, or who anyone else was. The doctors were amazed that he was awake at all, though, since they had predicted that he may well die while still in the coma. The next few days were rough, as my dad's memory slowly returned, and I forgot all about the apparition. A few days later, I was home alone. I needed a short break from helping my dad reintegrate his memories, and I knew he'd be fine for a few hours, under the care of several kind staff members at the nursing home nearby. I was getting clean clothes from my room when I saw a note on my pillow. I blinked at it, in confusion a few times, then read it thoroughly before dropping it in shock. I hadn't recognized the handwriting, but the paper had the hospital's name printed at the top. "Even though you didn't help me, You're welcome. Signed, Andrea. Chills went up my spine after I read it, and the note haunts me to this day. Andrea, I want to thank you so much for what you did for my dad. I'm not exactly sure what you did or how you did it, but I know you helped him find his way back to me. I'm so sorry that I was a coward and ran from you, and I hope you found peace. To this day, Hunter, 9 years after his ghostly encounter, still has night terrors about meeting such a horrifying being. Sometimes he wakes up in the night screaming, though he never seems to remember doing this, and I can't help but wonder if Andrea is punishing him from beyond the grave. Number 4. I've always enjoyed scary things like horror movies and scary books or stories, and I even listen to stories from this channel when I'm doing chores. So when I hear about encounters or supernatural or unexplained things that have happened to people, I never think it would happen to me. For some context, I'm a very observant person, so I have always heard weird noises and always had an explanation to go with them. That all changed Friday night of this week. I was laying in bed trying to sleep and not being able to, due to the fact I have breathing problems, and it doesn't let me sleep. I checked my phone and it was 11:59 p.m., and I always remember that number. And that is when I heard a noise that resembled a loud meowing from a cat, but it sounded demonic and scary. In my mind, I was wondering what it was. The noise repeated for about 3 times, and it stopped. Being the person I am, I got up from bed and looked outside my window. I know, never a good idea to do it, and I've seen enough horror movies to know not to do that. But I'm naive, so I did it anyway. And I see nothing, so I closed the window that I had opened because of the hot and humid spring air. I go to the bathroom and do my business, and then I'm washing my hands, and I hear the noise again. I go and look out the window again, and once again I see nothing. So I grab my bat, which is not the cheap plastic one, or not really good wood. It was a genuine MLB model, so we can do a lot of damage. I check the front yard, and then the back. Again I see nothing, and decided just to go back to my room. I left the bat beside my bed, just in case I needed it. I lay there for about 20 minutes, wondering what the noise was, and never will know. The noise sounded so odd to me. It might not be scary to others, but it was to me. Not only will I be checking under my bed for a killer orange cat, I will be looking for something else too. Narrator's note. How did you know that the demonic howling you heard wasn't our killer orange cat? Number 5. Howling. My fiancée Alana and I have always been into the occult and paranormal. We're the kind of people who used to fantasize about getting to see a cryptid, or exploring a famous haunted location just for the thrill. I have to be careful about being around too much of the dark energy that some haunted locations have, though, since I'm an empath. For anyone not familiar with the term, an empath is defined as a person with a paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. Since childhood, I have learned to manifest my ability, and by now I can absorb emotions from the physical and metaphysical realms. It's a blessing and a curse. Last Tuesday, Alana and I were in the car on our way home from work when our favorite DJ came on the radio. Good evening. This is Mitchell McCarthy on WSK 99.4, and we have a treat for the first person who can call and name this song from the following snippet. This is your last chance to win one of our road trip revelry packages. After a brief pause, the music started playing, and we listened intently. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful... And it stopped. As it stopped, the radio host came back on. Now let's see what lucky caller will win this road trip-tastic reward. Lana's mom is a huge fan of older music, so we already knew who it was and what the song was. My fiancée immediately dialed the number, not expecting to be the right caller, but she was. I grinned as she correctly blurted out the right answer, silently high-fiving her. Louis Armstrong. What a wonderful world. The radio host paused dramatically. Then he made a drum roll sound with his hands. Ladies and gents, we have a winner. You know what that means, miss? You and 2 friends have won an all-inclusive road trip to wonderful New Orleans. And you guys will be getting to Louisiana just in time to get some beads. My fiancé got off the phone, grinning from ear to ear. Let's go pick up the tickets, though I know neither one of us is really interested in Mardi Gras. I nodded, thinking about who else we should have tag along with us. Oh, we should bring Co. He's right along the way, and who said we have to go to the Mardi Gras? I'd rather go to the Manchac Swamp, the home of the Rougarou. I think the locals call it the Cajun Werewolf. After getting the hotel tickets and the food and gas vouchers, we packed our bags. I made sure to bring a bunch of extra socks, since I've always hated having wet socks on. And then we called up the office and put in our time off. 2 weeks later, we set off on a road trip from northeast Pennsylvania to the bayou country of Louisiana. And I couldn't remember being more excited for a vacation. The whole ride south, Alana and I discussed our plans for the trip. Neither of us had ever been to Louisiana, or thought we ever would, so we'd never looked up what things were in the area to do. Upon searching Google, we finally made a plan for our week in Louisiana, and it couldn't have been more perfect unless we went in October rather than July. Monday, we would just relax in the hotel, but we weren't staying in just any hotel. The one the radio prize included was the stay at the Dauphine Orleans Hotel, which was located in the French Quarter. This hotel was rumored to be one of the most haunted hotels in Louisiana, and it complemented the theme of our trip perfectly. Tuesday, we would explore the French Quarter and see if we could spot the infamous vampire twins of Louisiana. On Wednesday, we would explore the outskirts of the city and try to find old houses that had been abandoned, as well as visiting some of the famous voodoo shops. Thursday, we would explore the supposedly haunted St. Vincent's Asylum, which was also located in the French Quarter. And then, for the weekend, we would go to the Manchac Swamp and camp. We would search for the Rougarou and for the voodoo princess, Julie White's cabin, that was said to be hidden deep in the Manchac Swamp. As the hours passed, Alana and I would switch off driving through each state, stopping for leg breaks. Finally, 14 hours into the trip, we reached our pit stop for the night. We parked, and my best friend Kendra, who we call Co, in her driveway in Birmingham, Alabama, and it felt great to be out of the car. It was actually our first time meeting him in person, so it was an emotional moment for all of us. He was overjoyed to see his big bro and big sis, and since he was a fairly large man, he squeezed us into his pillow-like frame with gusto. After telling him about our plan for the week, he was eager to pack some camping gear and to read up about local lore. His tone was zealous, and he quickly gathered what he needed. I want to see the giant wolf man of Manchac Swamp. That was the last thing he said before we all went to sleep. And after 14 hours of straight driving, my fiancé and I were so exhausted that even the hardwood floor of Co's bedroom felt like a memory foam mattress. The next morning, we got up around 8:30 and set off on the last 4 hours of the drive. We were so excited to finally be in the voodoo capital of the U.S., and right around mid-afternoon, we reached New Orleans. The minute I stepped into the hotel, the energy hit me like a freight train. It made me physically sick for about an hour, and after checking in to room number 113, we decided to relax and take a nap. We wanted to spend the night with our EVP and heat cameras, trying to find any spirits that were here, and to see if they were as bad as they seemed. None of us could sleep well, though. I'm not sure if it was because of our excitement, or if something more paranormal was keeping us awake. We ate dinner out, and checked out some local attractions, and when the clock hit midnight, we got our equipment unpacked. The EVP meter immediately started going off, worse than at any other place I'd been to. Lana and Co. nearly shit their pants at the sight of how much energy was in our room, and it definitely explained the feeling I had when I first walked into the building. After 20 minutes of setting up cameras and unpacking equipment, we were ready to explore. As we walked through the empty halls of the hotel, we whispered about how odd it was that such a packed hotel would be so silent in the dead of night. Nearly 45 minutes had passed, and nothing was caught on our heat camera, and the EVP device wasn't going off as much as it was initially, so we decided to call it a night, since we would have more time to explore in the upcoming days. The next few days passed, and we were all growing restless over the fact that we hadn't seen anything even remotely paranormal yet. The places we picked should have had at least some kind of interesting vibes, but there wasn't anything. Over dinner on Wednesday night, Alana made a proposal to Ko and I, and we readily agreed. "Babe, can we just cancel the St. Vincent's tour and go to the swamp tomorrow? It seems like all the drunk, living partiers scared away anything paranormal." After she was done talking, I nodded enthusiastically, and Ko breathed a sigh of relief. Well, thank God, someone else had the same idea. We set off back to the hotel to check out and gather our stuff. After about an hour of packing, we fit everything back into our car. Based off all the legends, this was the part of the swamp that we would be most likely to see the Rougarou in, or find the alleged still-standing witch's cabin. Since I was the only one who was an avid hunter, I was the only one with a gun, and I made sure to pack my .45 caliber pistol with 2 full clips of ammo in case of an emergency. It's common knowledge that large snakes and alligators live in the swamps in Louisiana, so we had figured that we would rather have some means of defense than nothing. After walking for what seemed like hours, we finally decided to take a rest. We had just trekked through one of the roughest parts of the swamp trail, so I immediately changed my socks. I figured that we would use the grime-covered ones as fire fuel later in the night if we couldn't find tinder, and I had plenty with me, so I wasn't worried. Thankfully, it was a warm night in the swamp though, so we didn't need to start a fire at all. The fireflies surrounded us that night, and it was as if there was a million stars. It was literally the most beautiful thing any of us had ever seen, and it was so relaxing that we were all dozing off in our camping chairs. That is, until we heard an eardrum-bursting howl that sounded like it was right behind us. I took out my pistol and fired a warning shot. A moment later, the grass behind us parted to reveal a scraggly-looking man with long dark hair. "Please don't shoot me. I wandered onto here an accident, and I don't even know where here is. I heard you guys talking and thought you might know the way out." My fiancée, being the caring person she is, paid no mind to the fact that his clothing was torn up, and he looked a little unhinged. She invited him to sit with us, and even got him a granola bar. After about 10 uncomfortable minutes, I finally spoke up. "So, why are your clothes torn up?" He gave a vague response about how the swamp can beat you up, but he didn't go into detail. I once again tried to get some information out of our strange visitor, though his heavy Cajun accent was a little hard to understand. "Did you see the thing that made that horrendous howl?" He shifted a little, and I could tell he wasn't feeling very comfortable with my questions. He finally replied, after thinking about his response carefully, "Boy, you can call me Jack. Now that we're all friends here, there is no need to worry. I can assure you I'm not one of those beasts. In fact, that howl is what scared me into coming here. I don't know how I got here, though I'm assuming I was drunk after the last week of Mardi Gras." I looked at Ko, as if to give him a "I don't trust him completely" look. Ko immediately returned the look, but we continued to chat amicably. We gave Jack an extra sleeping bag, and told him that he was welcome to sleep in one of our chairs. We said we would show him the way out in the morning, since it was too dangerous to travel in the swamp at night, which he readily agreed to. The next morning we all rose to find Jack was missing. I looked at Alana and shook my head. "Still trust him? You and I both know he had very odd energy." But she sighed and just looked down, knowing I was right. We packed our gear up, hiking further into the swamp. The next few hours went fast, and the heat was blistering. We all just wanted to relax in the water, but even we knew it wasn't wise to swim in bayou water. A few hours later, we finally saw a broken down shack in the middle of the swamp, and we got excited. What if this was the cabin of the voodoo priestess? The shack had been left untouched for a long time, since there was moss growing on everything. We made our way inside the building, and we were immediately weirded out. Laying in the floor was a little hand-sewn doll, and it looked exactly like Jack. We decided to set up camp for the night, but made sure we got well away from the shack. That night was a bit chillier, so we made a fire. We were telling scary stories around it when we again heard a loud howl. No sooner had I put my gun in my hands than Jack came walking out of the swamp. Friends, we meet again. I'm sorry I left so unexpectedly this morning. A big old snake chased me off, and then I got lost until I saw the fire. Mind if I stay with you again tonight? We hesitated, but we didn't want him to get hurt out there, so we agreed. He smiled and thanked us again, and the hours passed quickly as we ate and chatted until we got sleepy. Well, the next morning, the same thing happened. Jack had vanished again, leaving us all extremely concerned. I had decided that if we saw him again tonight, I would stay awake until morning to see where he kept going. We hiked back out of the swamp, double timing it to cover more ground than our previous unhurried pace had done. We had not seen anything out of the normal, other than that doll and Jack, but we still had fun, and we got back to the first campsite relatively fast, though we were all exhausted by then. After setting up camp, I told Ko and Alana my plan for the night, in case Jack came back, and Ko decided he would be staying up with me, because he didn't want to risk me getting harmed. Once again, we heard the howl after sunset, and as expected, Jack came walking out of the swamp behind us right after. We all exchanged a look, and welcomed him back as though nothing had happened. A few hours later, Alana fell asleep, and so did Ko. Despite him saying he would stay up, he finally passed out, and I pretended to, while still keeping an eye on Jack. I must have dozed off at some point, because when I opened my eyes, the fire was out, and Jack was heading into a nearby clump of bushes. I got up and followed him, trying to see where he went in the dim moonlight. "Jack, where are you going?" His response was not what I had expected. Instead of hearing him shout back, I heard the howl again, but this time it was behind me. As I turned around, slowly I saw it, the Rougarou, and it was a large, almost humanoid, white wolf with the most blood-red eyes I had ever seen. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was terrified and I blacked out. Upon waking, I jumped up and looked around, terrified because I was still somewhere in the swamp with that thing. Dawn was just showing, and I stumbled back to camp. I could hear Alana and Ko shouting to me from the distance, and I hurried back to them. They looked worried sick, and we were relieved to be back together. We figured I must have had a night terror, which I was known for, and I must have sleepwalked out of the camp. We made our way out of the swamp, and back to our car, and after packing up quickly, we headed out of Louisiana and back towards Ko's house. On our way home, however, I felt different. I was more hungry than normal. As I looked into the mirror, my normally hazel eyes did something I had never seen before. They flashed blood red, just like that monster I'd seen last night. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. I hope you enjoy these stories. I don't get most of my stories from subscribers. I go in search of them. But occasionally, I really enjoy putting a video together for all of you with your stories. This video was supposed to be out quite a while ago, but my sister and I experienced another attempted break-in of our house the other day. Fortunately, this time the intruder did not get in, but it did cause some delays. Due to this, we are starting to look around for a new place to live. Because, 2 times in a month, after living here for 6 years, is kind of bad. But if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, Please use the subscribe button and the bell below so you'll be updated whenever a new video comes out. Comment on the video, and I haven't been answering a lot of comments lately, but I plan on getting back to that now that I have a lot more time to do it. So leave me a comment, and hopefully I'll talk to you. Share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address in the description. But whatever you do, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.
To all Reddit travelers, what is your creepiest hotel story? My mom was traveling for work and sat next to a man, fellow business traveler, on the plane. They had a casual conversation and exchanged business cards. Later that evening she's in her hotel watching TV, and gets a phone call from the front desk that her husband is here and they want to know if they can give him a key to the room. Turns out the creep on the plane was pretending to be her husband to try to get into her room. Found a hotel in Yangon, Burma, the day we got there for pretty cheap. They mentioned the rates were low because maintenance was being done on several floors. We sleep fine, wake up and head to breakfast. At breakfast we met some Germans who had also stayed the night in our hotel. They said they had not slept well because during the middle of the night someone woke them up to move them from the floor they were on. We, us and the Germans, found out later that they had been moved because they were on one of the levels reserved for maintenance, and part of the maintenance included gassing the rooms for bugs. During the middle of the night they were just going around the rooms shoving the gas nozzle or whatever under the doors and letting them run. Wound up killing the two people next to the Germans before they realized they'd accidentally booked people on that floor. We weren't on that floor thankfully, but it has always stuck with me how seemingly easy it could have been to have gotten mixed up in that. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the bedbug asphyxiation spray kill you at night. In 1996, while air drying naked after a shower lying on my hotel bed in Beijing with the curtains drawn, I received a call demanding I put on clothes. What the F? So the room was bugged? It was in Red China, in a hotel authorized for foreign guests. I hope you proceeded to do the windmill for them and pick up pennies. I arrive at a secluded, coastal hotel south of Marmaris, Turkey around 2 a.m. It had been a long day in Istanbul followed by a flight and long bus ride into Marmaris where I haggled with non-English speaking taxi drivers, who were not even aware that this small resort exists. When the taxi pulls up to the hotel, it's on fire. When the owner, standing out front, sees us, he opens the taxi door excitedly. You come. I have nice room for you. I point out that the hotel is on fire but he simply gestures and says, small fire. No problem. You come. I am utterly exhausted. I find myself following the owner into the hotel, stepping over fire hoses, waving away smoke, passing firefighters as they run up and down a very nice staircase. We pause at the second floor landing and the owner tells me, see? Fire only on this side of hotel. This side no fire. You come. My exhaustion removes every ounce of common sense and I follow him to a room down the hall. The room is indeed fire-free. I quickly scan the, in case of fire message, on the back of the door, check the window escape, and promptly pass out with my gear and boots on. In the morning I awake alive wondering if I dreamt the entire thing. I go down the smoky stairs past the charred other side of the hotel. The owner is so happy to see me still alive that he eats breakfast with me. I went back a few years later and the hotel had fully recovered. I once stayed in a B&B which had a shared bathroom. The first night I got up at probably like 2 a.m. and I was bursting for a pee. The bathroom was down the hallway, not too far but seemed like such an effort in my tired state. I get to the bathroom and open the door and there was this guy just standing in the bathroom, dressed head to toe in a mime costume. Face painted and everything. He was squatted down on the floor but his trousers were still up. I looked at him for a second, he gave me a wave with a smile and began just silently pushing. I just ran back to my room, locked the door and decided to pee in a bottle. I'm still not sure if I was just really tired and seeing things or something. It's seriously the strangest thing I've ever seen. I arrived late at a hotel for a business trip. Flight had a malfunction so we had to land. They fixed it on the tarmac and we never deplaned. Room already paid for, confirmation number in hand, etc. I got there about 5 hours after I was supposed to be there. Of course, they gave away my room. I already wasn't happy from all the delays and I wasn't going anywhere. The event I was there for was in their hotel. I wanted my room. I was polite but resolutely firm. They did some scrambling and asked if I would consider a damaged room under construction. As long as the sheets are clean so I can go to bed, I don't care, was my reply. Mistake. The room they gave me was literally a crime scene. The case had been closed so there was no legal issue to contend with, but someone had been killed, or nearly killed, not 100% sure, in that room. They had primed over the blood stains on the walls and ceiling but had only taped down semi-clear plastic over the pooled blood on the carpets. Multiple small holes in the walls had obviously been patched and sanded, but there were multiple small holes in the wall. They gave me a completely new bed and TV from on-site inventory so I was comfortable, but man, it was creepy as hell. The creepiest part was the priming job. It was so obviously blood splatter. You could see where the person had been hit and where they fell. You could also see how they had tried to get up and where they had finally collapsed. Okay, so I already posted this on another thread, but when I was about 4 years old my family ended up staying at the Cedar Lodge Motel, where Cary Stayner worked right before he murdered 4 women. My family drove to Yosemite, and it was a long drive for us, 3 kids all under the age of 7 plus 2 adults, and a F-ton of mountains will do that. By the time we arrived at the motel, it was late, we were all cranky, and we couldn't wait to get out. But the moment we pulled in, something set my mom's teeth on edge and she insisted that we left and found another hotel, reservation or not. My mom has always had this like sixth sense and her gut has actually saved us a couple of times, but my dad was tired and convinced her to ignore her gut and stay for just the night and the next morning we'd leave. I can remember my mom actually refusing to let go of our hands, making us stay right by her side as she kept looking around while checking in. To try and get her to relax, my dad suggested we go to the pool, thinking it would calm her down. Well, when we got there, there were no towels so my mom called the front desk. The moment the man delivering towels arrived, my mom immediately grabbed us out of the water and rushed us back to the room. The man gave her the absolute creeps and she says there was just this feeling of pure evil when he looked at us. That night my mom and dad pushed the dresser in front of the door and had us all sleep in the same bed. The next morning, we left to go to another hotel but my mom couldn't stop talking about how evil that motel was. About 2 months later, she and my dad were up late watching the news when they started reporting on a man who had murdered a woman and 2 young girls in Yosemite. Just as my mom began to say, "I bet it was at that motel," they showed Cary Stayner's face and said it occurred at the Cedar Lodge Motel. Cary Stayner was the man who brought us our towels at the pool. We've never gone back to Yosemite and my mom is always insistent that we listen to our gut feeling and when every bone in your body is telling you something is wrong, GTFO. I was staying in Birmingham, Alabama at a Hyatt. Nothing crazy. Nothing obviously creepy. One night around 2 a.m. I woke up to a man screaming. Like, stabbed in the heart scream. I sat there in a panic, wondering if I should call someone, but when I didn't hear anything else I chalked it up to a dream. The next night I woke up around 3 a.m., and had this horrible feeling that someone was in my room. I rolled over and there was an old man, sitting on the AC, it was boxed in, smoking, looking away from me. I stared at him for a few seconds and he turned to look at me. So I shot up out of bed, ready to run, and no one was there. I don't lucid dream. While I have vivid dreams, they are not that vivid. I can describe that man to a T, and yet he was never there. Okay, I've got 3 creepy stories back from when I was backpacking through India with my girlfriend. We are 2 girls from Europe. In Bangalore we booked a hotel after 18 hours spent in a night bus. We were very tired and wanted a bed and some food. The boys at the reception were kind of creepy and staring at us all the time but we shrugged it off and went in our room at around 9 in the evening. At around 11 the lights went completely off. I tried to call the reception but the phone was out. Suddenly the door handle to our room started moving. I turned on the lantern on my phone and looked at the door. It was slowly opening. My girlfriend screamed and I jumped off the bed, pushing the door back into its place. The person outside was pushing as well so we fought like this for a little while. Then I lock the door again. 5 minutes pass and we hear the noise again. The person outside had a key and now they were opening the door slowly. It was so creepy, I kept banging on the door shouting, "Get the F out! Help!" We called the police who eventually did nothing. We didn't sleep the whole night. We were in South, booking a hotel. My girlfriend was using the bathroom when she suddenly started screaming. I went in just in time to see a hole in the ceiling and an eye. The person ran immediately and we could hear the footsteps on the roof. After our 6 months travels, we were really tired of booking cheap and scary places for sleep. I had an accident and was barely moving, so I asked my girlfriend to book the nicest hotel, asked specifically for white sheets. It was my time to shine. So the hotel looked nice, white sheets indeed. The guy at the reception was sleeping in a sleeping bag in the reception, but whatever. We went to sleep in our white sheets just to wake up hours later covered in ticks and bug beds full of our blood. 5 out of 7. My husband's family is from India and 0 out of 10 of them would recommend 2 girls backpacking without any males through India. Actually, 0 out of 10 would recommend backpacking through India at all. You are so lucky you survived. Was in San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua last year. Massive spiders all over the room. Even woke up with a couple of little scorpions in my bed the first morning. Next night I'm sitting at the bar, drinking and chatting with a mate, feel a tickle on the back of my neck and think it's a mosquito or something. Brush the back of my neck and another mother effing scorpion, this time way bigger, plops on the ground at my feet. Stared at it for a moment in shock, squealed like a girl, squashed it and kept drinking. Gah, I hated those big spiders in Nicaragua. They're so fast. And if they come in contact with you, you'll get a painful rash. Worst. Ever. Well, apparently I am never going to Nicaragua. Oh, I have one. Though this has turned out quite long to describe. So, mine takes place in a London hostel a few weeks ago. I have 2 friends with me that are both male, and we're staying in a 9-bed mixed dorm. There are 3 sets of 3-tier bunk beds. I'm in the bottom bed of the right bunk, friend 1 in the top of my bunk, friend 2 in bottom bed of middle bunk. So, we get in at 2 a.m. and all just quietly get in our beds. After a few minutes of lying there trying to sleep I hear rustling behind me. I'm lying on my side facing the wall. So I think it is just someone going through their bag and ignore it. Then I feel a hand on my hip over the cover. I turn around and it's a random guy telling me to move over and trying to pull at my cover. I initially thought he was drunk and wasn't sure which bed to be in, so I tell him to go find his own bed, and then he shuffles away to bottom bed of left bunk. Then he comes back again. I again tell him to go back to his own bed and he shuffles back to his own again. This happens another couple of times, with me gradually speaking louder and getting less polite telling him to F off. So I'm shaking cause the situation is making me nervous, and message my mate that's on the top bunk, saying I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep that night. He messages back casually thinking it's cause of someone snoring. This is when I find out both my mates have earplugs in and although they've heard me speaking, they each thought I was speaking to the other friend. So I tell him the situation and he starts keeping an eye out. I hear the guy go to the bathroom that is en suite, but I can tell from the light he left the bathroom door open whilst doing so and refused to look. My mate fills me in that the guy was walking round with his pants down and deliberately left the door open to get me to look. But either way the guy goes back to his bed after and we think the situation is finally over. Then it happens again, my mate keeping an eye out shines his phone light on the floor and shouts for the guy to F off. Apparently he was crawling across the floor again towards me. The guy suddenly takes offense at my mate's light shining on him, and starts actually climbing the bunk ladder like King Kong to get to my mate on the top and was trying to take his phone. They wrestle for a while with my mate actually kicking the guy in the neck to try and keep him away, only for the guy to swing backwards and come straight back at him again. I use this time to run for security, who find the guy still hanging on the bed when they get there, then call the police and have the guy taken away in a riot van and banned from the building. Whilst the police had dragged him outside waiting for the riot van, the guy even head-butted the brick wall several times. No idea what that guy was on because it wasn't alcohol, but definitely on something to take a kick to the neck and still act like nothing happened afterwards. The guy kept trying to blame my mate when security came as well, saying things in broken English like, "Come up here and see how violent this guy is." My other mate that had slept through the whole incident, kept saying the next day that he couldn't believe how friendly everyone in London is. My company would put us up in the Shiloh in downtown when we were in Salt Lake City. A coworker of mine was awakened in the middle of the night by the sounds of a bunch of kids in the hallway. It went on for longer than he could tolerate, so he opened the room door to tell them to hush, only to find the hallway empty. He could still hear the children, so figuring they were in an adjoining room, he called down to the front desk to complain. The man at the front desk claimed to be certain there were no kids staying on that floor, but that he was certain the noise would subside in a bit. He offered to send up some earplugs. My coworker was a bit annoyed. How can you say there are no kids here when I'm hearing kids? But went back to bed and eventually fell asleep. The next day when he was checking out, a different clerk made the mistake of asking the routine question. Was everything satisfactory with your stay? My coworker gave her an earful about the noisy kids, and how the other clerk had dismissed his complaints. The clerk looked a little uncomfortable, and said in a half-whisper, "We are not supposed to talk about our history with guests. But please do a Google search for Rachel David and you'll understand what happened to you. We get similar complaints every few weeks, and we try to never put kids on that floor." In the van on the way to the airport, he read on his phone the story of how a mother, Rachel David, had tossed her 7 children off the 11th floor balcony of the hotel, then called the International Dunes, to their deaths before jumping herself. Holy crap. Thank you for sharing. What a messed up story. Feeling effed up right now imagining a mother prying her children's fingers off the railing and watching them screaming on the way down. What the F? Checked into a hotel on vacation. Everything was going okay. Woke up one night to erratic movement of the door handle as if someone was trying to get in or break the door down. Always happened in the dead of the night when in deep sleep. As soon as I woke up it would stop. Spoke to a hotel manager about it and he told me it was a patient who was recently released from a mental institute, who does this as he still thinks he is locked up in the institute. A combination of not taking his medication and sleepwalking makes his randomly try and kick doors down within the hotel. The family was very wealthy and connected and the manager didn't want to kick up a fuss, for chucking out someone who can shut his business down very quickly. I left after a week because it got worse. This happened to my father. Not me, but definitely too creepy not to share. My father went with a group to go on a trip to Tanzania to do some medical work in a poorer village. For a few nights of the trip the group stayed in a hotel. My dad was sharing a room with another man from the group, separate beds. One night, he is woken up by his roommate who has the light on. He looks terrified, trembling and praying. My dad asks what's wrong but he won't say anything about it. My dad is obviously concerned. But since he can't do anything about it, he goes back to sleep. The next night, in the middle of the night, my father gets up to pee. He walks to the bathroom and starts to relieve himself when he catches a very strong scent of body odor. He and most of the people from the group are daily deodorant wearers, being from the US. Many locals in Tanzania don't wear it as frequently, so when the smell hits his nose he realizes he and his roommate might not be alone. He turns around and sees standing there in the doorway, a local woman shaking violently, her eyes rolled up locked on the ceiling. He panics, as no one should have been able to get into the room. He turns back around towards the bathroom in a moment of confusion, but when he turns back she just gone, as if she had never been there. Shaken, he goes back to bed thinking maybe he was dreaming or seeing things. He lays back down on his side and adrenaline starting to wear off, he begins to doze off again. Suddenly the smell returns. He slowly rolls over and looks to his left. There in the bed beside him, is the woman, laying flat on her back, eyes glued to the ceiling. Again panicking, he breaks his line of sight to her and again she is gone. My dad wasn't able to get back to sleep. The woman never made another appearance. He asked his roommate about it the next morning and he had encountered the same thing the night before, which was why he was so shaken. It could be explained by the fact that they were both on anti-malaria drugs which can have side effects that include strange dreams, but still. Super creepy. And definitely weird that even if it was caused by the medication, both my father and his roommate experienced the same thing. My girlfriend works as a TV commercials producer and often travels to South America, mainly Argentina. One night she woke up at around 3 a.m. to find a male hotel employee standing at the foot of her bed staring at her. When they checked the CCTV he had been doing it for hours that night and for the previous 3 nights. When I was about 4, my family was at the resort in St. Kitts. I was swimming with some of the friends I made there, when one of them speaks of a woman at the pool, calling her retarded. I didn't know what that meant at the time. She had some mental disability, I don't know what it was. One point during the swim I found myself in front of her, and out of sight of my parents. I don't remember anything leading up to this moment, but I remember her telling me, "Close your eyes and you'll get a big surprise." I did, not knowing any better, and she started hitting the top of my head with her fist and holding me underwater. Luckily my mom spotted this happening and stopped it. The woman who tried to drown me had a helper who was supposed to keep an eye on her, but was found suntanning and not paying any attention at all. My mom lost it on her for not paying attention. This whole thing was more scary than creepy, but it stuck with me ever since, so I thought I'd share. I toured around in bands a lot in my 20s, and not once but twice came back to my hotel room to find a turd in my shower. I was the only person with a key to the room. One was in Germany and one was in Belgium. 2 years apart, completely separate tour and crew. Phantom Crapper strikes again.